Hello listeners, and welcome to the Montel Weekly Podcast, bringing you energy matters in an informal setting. This episode, the second of which rounds off our summary of 2022 and looks forward to 2023, starts off by discussing dramatic events in the Nordic region before we move to Germany, which found itself needing to replace Russian gas supply, and quickly. Finally, we touch on global coal and gas markets, which have also seen their fair share of upheaval over the past 12 months. We will hone in on the war in Ukraine, the ongoing energy crisis, soaring prices, policy interventions across the continent, and much, much more. Let's start in the Nordic region. So a warm welcome to you, Olav, Vilnes, and Gert over Mollestad.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So if I can start with you, Olav, how would you summarize the year to now? Or the year that's just gone, really? Or the year that's close to ending, should we say?
It's close to ending and it never ends in a way. It's a very special year, extremely special year, and the price levels we've never seen before. A lot of drama. It's been a lot of political heated debates about market reforms. So I think for most people who have been in this business for decades, I think this is probably the most dramatic year they have ever experienced.
Absolutely. And what's your view here?
No, it's completely unprecedented. Never seen anything like it, and hopefully it will be a long time to see anything like it again. But you don't know what next year will bring. So
absolutely, keeps us on our toes anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Olav, what would you say would be the key events in 2022? In the Nordic energy market, both gas and power?
Yeah, the key event is also in the Nordic region is, of course, the war in Ukraine. It had a huge impact on gas prices in continental Europe, which spilled over to the Nordic market since it's coupled to Germany. So then you get, at least in the southern parts of Scandinavia, you've had price levels very high, several hundred euros, close to what they have in Germany. And this has, of course, created a very difficult situation for companies who operate in the market, particularly power retailers, the big power consumers. Power producers, of course, they have earned a lot of money, but they've also had some problems balancing it. I mean, the trading in the markets has been difficult, so I don't think anyone is happy with that development.
And anything to add here?
Yeah, sure. The extreme high price levels on the continent was also coupled with a very dry period, at least in southern Norway. So you had the hydropower producers really had to cut back on production, and the southern part of Norway experienced maybe the driest spring in 140 years. So there were several power plants to just stop. They ran out of water. So it was. So you got this kind of a double whammy when you had the extreme price level on the continent, and then in addition you had really a lack of water. So it was on the way to become really critical. But we were saved by the rain.
What came in the autumn?
We had a very wet autumn, especially in southern parts of Norway, and that was really lucky and necessary.
It's like all I was saying, and this also then led to a very heated political discussion in Norway. I don't know if the same is in Sweden and Finland as well, or across the Nordics, but certainly in Norway, you can maybe describe some of the elements of the debate there.
Yeah, you have across the political spectrum. There are politicians talking about limiting exports, and kind of you have to keep the Norwegian energy market intact and limit exports, but that is highly controversial. And also the oil and energy minister and the prime minister has said that this is not on the agenda, even though they are considering implementing some form of mechanism to curb exports when reservoirs are really low. We haven't seen the details in that yet, and it's highly uncertain how that will be. But the political sentiment has really become heated in Norway this year due to the high prices, unprecedented high prices.
And what was the sentiment elsewhere in the Nordic region, Olav?
The political debate has been very strong. I think Norway and Sweden probably have the highest end user consumption. I mean, they have probably people are more linked to the price in the market, so they get the price effect very quickly on the pockets. And they both countries have introduced compensation schemes to sort of appreciate some of, or sort of reduce some of the anger among households. But I think businesses are suffering heavily. There is a debate, and there's a new government coming in Sweden. I think it was a big it was a big part of the Swedish election debate this autumn, where we had a center-right opposition coming to power because they were advocating for more nuclear build, which is of course very high prices we need. Why did you, the former government, allow the closure up to for 4 nuclear reactors, which we really would have needed this winter? So I mean, they used that argument very strongly in the election, and now they are. They have said, at least in their political plan for the next 4 years, that they will focus more on nuclear. They will allow construction of large nuclear plants and as well as small modular reactors. So that's a clear political thing. You also seen in Finland, you had now recently a big debate about a price cap actually on household bills. 280 euros is 180 euros. I'm sorry, which is of course high, but I think they it hasn't been decided yet. But the governing party, the main government party in the Finnish coalition, is actually proposing it. So it's likely they will introduce it.
Absolutely. So it's a very hot issue across the region. But then you say the new nuclear could be an answer to supply coming online, although that could be decades away. But also problems with the nuclear fleet in, say, Sweden and Finland has contributed to the high prices, has it not?
It has. Remember back in May when you had both the Finland and Baltic region stopped importing electricity from Russia due to the war and sanctions. And then they all said, okay, at least we get the Olkiluoto 3 nuclear plant up and running, the new 1.6 gigawatt reactor, which has been delayed for more than a decade. And what happened is that it did come back, but it fell out again, and it came back and fell out again in test mode. And now it has been out for several weeks. They say it should come back to test operation during Christmas, with a full commercial start in February. But it remains to be seen, because their history isn't really good on what they promise and what they expect. So I think many traders, analysts in the market expect that this could be out for even longer.
So you will spend your Christmas looking at the UMM, the Urgent Market Messengers Board on Nord Pool, then, Olav?
We will, and I think it also shows that, I mean, now when you have had the cold weather this in December, you saw that consumption is much lower. So that has in a way saved. The price signal has been strong. It has urged people and industries to save electricity, which and in that way you avoided any energy crisis or any energy shortage. So in that sense, I think the price signal has worked as well.
I mean, anything to add then, Gert?
Yeah, and we have seen that some of the aluminium smelters in Norway has been shut down partially. Both Hydro and Alcoa has shut down some plants. Or at least reduced consumption at some plants due to the very high prices, and also some. Elkem announced last week that they have shut down 2 smelters at 2 different plants to stop production and then sell the energy in the market. So they make more money in selling the energy which they don't use than producing their products. So, and that is also a market signal that works. So the market needs power, and then we shouldn't produce metals, or maybe not as much as we used to.
Provide the market with the energy that it urgently needs.
Precisely, and the company earns more for this period. But as a long-term signal, it might be a bit worrying, because it illustrates that we are heading into a situation with a lack of power, both in Norway and maybe in the Nordics as a whole, due to higher consumption and a relatively slow build-out of new production. So that is a worrying long-term signal.
So the supply is sort of lagging behind in the medium
absolutely.
term. Absolutely, that's a concern for sure.
And you see some initiatives this year with governments actually calling for recalling coal-fired power in Denmark and Finland as a short-term measure. You've seen a 50% rise in oil shale production in Estonia to supply a shortage in the region. So emissions are probably going up short-term, despite carbon prices close to 100 euros. So it's a strange situation.
Yeah, that's also been happening in Germany, as listeners you will hear later. But if I can ask you, Gert, what took you most by surprise in this crazy year?
I think it was the combination of the very high prices on the continent, coupled with the drought in Norway, which just sent you had the extreme division between prices in northern Norway or the northern Nordics region and in the south, like close to zero prices in the north, and prices hitting almost 600 euros a week on average in late August, completely unprecedented. And also the impact this has had on the financial power market in the Nordics, which is very seriously. And we see now that the trading volumes, they are only traded and cleared. The volumes on Nasdaq so far this year is only 383 terawatt hours, which is compared to 742 last year.
Wow.
So it's and that was a really bad year as well.
So what was it at its peak? Do you know what it was at its peak? Was it over 1,000 maybe?
Yeah. We are heading for the worst level since 1997, like before the the establishment of the joint Nordic power markets. And players are saying that the system price is out of function. It's impossible to hedge against it, and people are withdrawing from the financial markets. And this is really serious. And I think that's a debate that has not surfaced. It should have gotten broader coverage in the mainstream media, I think, because that is a really bad signal for the entire Nordic power market.
Yeah, it should be a wake-up call for some of the policymakers here as well.
Absolutely,
to fix this quite urgently. Absolutely, because if that sort of falls away, that could have serious consequences. And if I can turn to you, Olav, what did you find most surprising in?
Yeah, if I can add, take a separate thing, of course. It's interesting to see this sharp divorce from Russia. I mean, if you look at, for example, Finland, the Baltic countries, they relied on Russian electricity imports, gas imports, and then it all stopped in May. Nothing more, no more imports. And they have turned around. They are now getting a floating LNG terminal into Finland during Christmas, which will really help the supply situation there. You've seen lots of consumption reduction as well. But I think the whole debate, it just shows that you can actually turn around very quickly and transform the way you supply your energy. And they've done it without any crisis. They have had high prices, definitely, but there's not been any energy supply crisis so far.
So the market has functioned through this worst crisis that we've seen since probably the oil crisis of the 1970s.
Yeah, and the one exception is probably when you had this price ceiling reached in the Baltic countries of 4,000 euros one day earlier this autumn. But that was, of course, also maybe a market mechanism issue. So they're trying to solve that out.
But that was because there was 2 megawatt lacking?
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. Yeah.
It was astonishing. I think there was also a lack of flexibility on the demand side. It just revealed that they have to do more to improve the demand flexibility, which they are doing as well. There's a lot of initiatives going on in all the countries to do that. So that will probably help in the future.
Yeah. So if I can round off by talking more about the outlook for next year. I know it's very hard in these situations to have any kind of view really or predictions, and it's not our job as journalists in a sense. But what does 2023 hold? What would you what do you think could happen in the first quarter here, or what are your fears here, Gert?
I fear a very cold winter. The weather forecast doesn't predict that now, which is very luckily, and we see that prices are really come down a lot the last couple of weeks, and the January contract is trading around 210, and then the Q1 are just about 200, which are still very very high levels, but significantly down, and but the hydrological reserve in the Nordic region are quite poor. It's around minus 17 terawatt hours compared to normal, and that is almost as bad as it was in early September when it bottomed out at minus 19. So the reserves are not that great, and if we have a very cold winter, then the consumption will stay high, and so it might get a kind of squeeze until spring, and that might be a bit serious. So let's really hope for a mild and wet winter. That's the key.
What was the winter like 21-22? Was there a lot of snow that fell in the mountains, or was there? Because we've already had quite a lot of snow in Norway.
But it was very unevenly distributed, with a lot of snow in northern Norway and central Norway, but a lack here in the south. So let's hope for a bit more, a balanced supply of snow all over the Nordic region. Then the situation will be will be better when we come to spring. So.
But one issue that's quite large in the Nordic region as well, isn't it? Or especially in Norway, I mean, Gert, is this issue of the taxing of
yeah. Do you want to go there?
Well, I know you've been following this very closely. Could you briefly summarize it? Do you think this could resolve itself by next year? What's the core issue here?
Well, the government have increased the ground rent tax, so the state will pull out a lot of more money from the power companies at the expense of the municipalities, who are the general owner. And in addition, they have introduced a kind of a high price tax which kicks in at around 70 euros megawatt hour, and then the state will take 90% of the income above that level. That is going to last for 2 years. And it has been extremely unpopular in the power business, saying that this will curb investments, especially in refurbishment of old power plants, which are needed to provide more higher effect. So that might, but as long as it's only going to last for next year in 2024, the investments will more or less go on. But even the state-owned utility Statkraft has said that we need to see it gone before we dare to take the investment decision. So it shows that they don't trust their own owners, which is kind of interesting.
Yes, and also taking from state or publicly owned municipalities to pay the state, so
which is maybe one of the richest in the world, given the oil fund. So it's a lot of paradoxes here.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope it gets resolved, and maybe it's only a short-term measure that doesn't cause lasting damage.
But as an internet, we have talked to international investors, and they are really, really angry about this, because it kind of takes a lot of money from them, which they had calculated, and there are several wind farms that are heading for bankruptcy. They have told us, if this is actually implemented, and then again the PPAs, the power deals with the industry, might be annulled. So the power industry might have actually end up with higher power prices due to this need of funding to balance the budget. So it's a quite messy picture,
and also will affect supply coming online as well. So which as increased the demand, not really sinking, but less supply. I mean that's doesn't seem to be a well thought out piece of legislation at all. Olav, what were your expectations for 2023?
Yeah, if I can stay away from the weather, I could say that what will be very interesting this year is how they react. I mean, every country in Europe have to increase their renewable energy production to meet increased demand, because we are shifting from fossil fuels to renewables across the sectors, from transport to industries to hydrogen production. And exactly what Norway did is, of course, what the industry doesn't need, because then you stop the investments that are very necessary. So it will also be interesting to see what happens now with the new governments in Sweden and Denmark. There's an election in Finland coming up. So how these new governments will sort of meet green transition, and how they will incentivize investments. I mean, very interesting now with the new Danish energy minister, a former lobbyist for the energy sector. Can be interesting to see what he can do, if he can do what he told the politicians to do previously, and also with the nuclear developments in Sweden, Finland, if they manage to do these small modular reactors, and how soon they can do it as well, which is also very interesting.
So Denmark will go for more wind, presumably, mainly offshore. Sweden is looking at small and large-scale nuclear, and Finland is also more wind, maybe.
I think it's Sweden and Finland quite similar. It's a combination of more wind onshore and offshore, as well as small modular reactors. While Denmark is mainly wind and hydrogen production to make demand more flexible, to increase demand, and then probably export some fuels to other countries. And then, of course, Norway is now probably mainly offshore wind, since they are destroying the investment climate for onshore wind.
Absolutely.
But that's more almost like 10 years ahead. So there will be some quite challenging years here for Norway, I think.
A few years of a supply squeeze. Well, I'm sure next year will keep us extremely busy, as this year has done, gentlemen. So thank you very much for joining the Montel Weekly Podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks. In this second episode of a review of 2022 and outlook for 2023, we turn to Germany. Helping me, Richard Sversen, to discuss all the relevant issues of 2022 and have a brief gaze into the crystal ball for 2023 are Julia Demirdag and Andreas Lochner of our Frankfurt office. A warm welcome to you both.
Hello, Richard.
If I
Very
can
good.
start, Julia, by asking you, how would you summarize 2022 in the sort of German energy market perspective?
So I would say at first it's really hard to summarize this year in just one sentence because there were so many changes. But yeah, certainly the market has turned upside down, supply has turned upside down, and even the power plants that are online now are nothing we expected at the beginning of this year. So yeah, it could be described as the year of the many changes.
Absolutely. I'm going to grant you a few more sentences, Julia, if you need. So what can you give us more detail? Which of the plants that are online now that were very we didn't think it was very likely at all that they would be on at the start of the year.
Yes. So last year Germany actually got a new government, which is also led by the Greens, which have their roots in the anti-nuclear movement. So, and it was actually them who decided to keep the nuclear plants, the last 3, online longer. So that's something that was certainly one of the big surprises. Germany wanted to exit nuclear power by the end of this year. And I would say most of the people didn't think that was something that would change, but yes, it did. And then obviously we got a lot of coal plants back. So emissions in Germany actually rose this year. Hard coal and lignite plants, they produced a lot of power, especially in the last quarter of the year. And that's also something that surprised many people looking at the Green government, I would say, yes.
Absolutely. So, Andreas, anything to add to that? How would you summarize 2022?
Yeah, as Julia said, it's hard to really summarize it. But looking back, who would have expected like 2 major gas importers to be nationalized by the end of this year with Uniper and Securing Energy for Europe? Who would have even thought of a company like Securing Energy for Europe, which has been called Gazprom Germania at the beginning of this year? So was a subsidiary of Russian Gazprom and is now owned by the German government, basically. Who could have imagined such a change? Obviously, all caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and all the subsequent things.
And how about on the policy front? Berlin has generally been tried very much to defend against some kind of intervention that's been called on from countries further south.
Yeah, I mean, just recently we've seen the agreement on the gas price cap here on the European level. Obviously, the big worry here in Germany is that if there's a gas price cap, and we will see how it will turn out next year. The big worry is that LNG ships, LNG cargoes are being diverted away from Europe because there is this gas price cap, and there might be some Asian country, some Asian utility paying more. So yeah, obviously they have been reluctant to agree on that because we've seen that the big cut from Russia already this year, and we need LNG to cover our gas demand. That's for sure.
Talk us through the LNG terminals, the floating storage units. Julia, how many can we expect? They've come online basically in sort of mid to late December. We can expect more next year and more coming online subsequently into over the coming years, locking in this fossil fuel.
Yes, that's actually something that's also surprising, like how fast Germany was able to build this import infrastructure. Like a couple of years back, I think LNG was very low on the list of the German government. And because we relied on the other import terminals more or less, and obviously Russian gas. So that's something new, and Germany has been really quick. 2 units have already good to go. So Uniper is starting this week, basically the week before Christmas, with their units, and then the other one in the Baltic Sea, Lubmin, is the ship has also already arrived, and they are still waiting for some last approvals. So then they will also be online and starting actually using the infrastructure that also the Russian gas used, because they're at the point where the pipelines from Russia came into Germany in Lubmin and East Germany. So the LNG will be flowing from there. So that's something that happened more quickly than anybody expected, I guess. And also RWE in Brunsbüttel, they're about to bring their unit online. They said early next year the first LNG is going to flow through there. So that's something that's certainly going to help. And looking further, I think the companies the operating companies and the government made a point that these terminals are importing LNG now, but in the future they need to be importing hydrogen as well, just to make sure, hopefully, that Germany is going to save carbon emissions to reach their environmental goal.
Absolutely.
That's important.
Which, when you're importing massive amounts of fossil fuel, it obviously doesn't sort of contribute towards those. But thank you, Julia. Now, Andreas, if I can tell you, how's this gas being sourced? Is it through long-term contracts, or is it on the spot market, or a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. We don't know too much about long-term contracts yet. But the utilities are trying to sign long-term contracts because obviously spot market volumes are limited, and German LNG demand is on top of all the other demand coming from elsewhere in the world. So if you really want to attract LNG cargoes to Germany, you have to offer something, and you also have to increase the export capacity somewhere else, be it in the US or Qatar or in Africa. So you have to offer them something, and that's why they're also looking for long-term contracts. But the problem obviously is we also have the climate goals. So Germany wants to be climate neutral by 2045. So that they can't really sign a contract that is longer than 20 years or 15,
Absolutely.
20 years.
But you've mentioned, these lignite and hard coal plants coming back online. What is that doing to the climate goals? Is this just a temporary blip that can be fixed? Or, how is this viewed in Germany?
The German government still targets a coal exit by 2030, so that target hasn't changed. What they want to do is they want to massively expand the renewables capacities by 2030, where they plan to reach a renewable share of 80% of the power mix by then. We have seen this year 46%. So there's still quite a lot to do. We've seen many undersubscribed renewables tenders this year. So it's not really taking off so far. But in terms of climate goals, hopefully that will happen next year.
If I could ask you, Andreas, what was most unexpected for you in the last 12 months?
Maybe two things. One thing is we have seen, obviously, problems of utilities, of market participants to handle the high risk management costs in the market. But still, the markets didn't fail. They kept on working. Liquidity was lower, volatility was extremely high. But still, we didn't see a market failure in a way. So that was sort of surprising, because if you see that Germany has received roughly half of its gas from Russia last year, and this year we're now basically at zero. You can't really tell if it's zero or a small portion, but it's next to nothing. So the whole supply picture has changed, that the markets have reacted. We have seen extremely high prices, but still the markets worked. Well, that was surprising to me. And the combination here, which is connected to that, the low Russian flows now. Still, Germany was able to fill gas storage by the end of this year. We're still at next or close to 90%. And that happened without much Russian gas. So
yep, absolutely.
That was kind of surprising.
I mean, you say there's no market failure, and I think you're absolutely right. But it came at a cost, didn't it? I mean, there was. I don't think it was either the nationalisation of Uniper or the filling of the gas storage came cheaply, shall we say? But no. But Julia, anything else that you found surprising the last year that or that you found sort of was unexpected?
Yeah, I think I never thought the German power cal would actually at some point, any given point, trade above 1,000 euros. So I think that's quite a blow for everyone in either direction. That
the frontier contract.
Frontier contract, but it's the European benchmark. So we just Andreas just this week, the week before Christmas, wrote our Christmas cards, and he said, in 10 years ago the cal trended around 50 euros the year had contract, and now this year we saw 1,000 euros. I think 1,050. I think that's a number anyone is going to remember even in the years to come. Like all the traders, they were like, wow, 1,000 or over 1,000, that's a lot. And so somebody must have paid this price. I mean, if you think about that, that's insane. Like last year, nobody would have thought that price, that would be an actual price for the cal, because that's that's for a whole year. It's not the spot where we see, on a daily basis, you have no wind or low temperatures. You get spiked, but in the cal, that's pretty. So big surprise, I would say.
Absolutely, and I think if I can also ask Julia, you speak to a lot of traders and analysts and experts in the market. What are you hearing about the first sort of 3 months or the first half year next year? What can we expect? I mean, we know a lot depends on the weather, of course, but in terms of security of supply and prices. What are the people that you talk to? What are they saying?
I think there is some hope in the market that the next year is going not to be as bad as this year. I mean, everyone hopes that, obviously. But there's the hope that there will be a return to maybe normal, maybe less volatility in the market. And I think the fact alone that Russia is out of the picture now means that was always the big thing people feared, and this fear is gone now that they are actually out of the market. So I think a big potential for surprise is gone. And other than that, people will be watching on the gas storage facilities. That's a big issue. So now we are close to 90%, but the big question is what's going to be next winter when there will be zero Russian gas in Germany throughout this whole year, new year. And I think people will be looking at this more than they probably did in the previous years. And but what will it bring? The weather. I think it's all about the weather.
Absolutely. No, thanks, Julia. And Andreas, what if I can ask you to gaze into your crystal ball, or maybe the crystal ball that of the people you speak to, of course, because that's what you do on a daily basis. So what's in store for 2023?
We can see many positive surprises if, like, renewables expansion is really picking up. If we see maybe a few more steps towards a hydrogen market, if we see gas prices falling. But as Julia said, for now, for the next few months, it really all depends on the weather. Sorry for for coming back to this, but because if we see cold weather, obviously, and gas storage levels fall quickly, then obviously also the prices for next winter will be higher again. And then in the long run, we might see problems in the German industry because obviously for a short moment, they can ramp down their production and they can sort of cope with the situation. But in the long run, if gas prices stay long for quite some time, we might see even production being sort of shifted to somewhere else, to the US or to Asia. For example, ammonium is a product which they might not be able to continue to produce here in Germany if gas prices stay at this level. It may mean that also there's a shift in the whole economic structure of Germany if the situation stays like this.
That's
for
quite a
long
bleak
time.
picture, and of course, the government's kind of wrapped the knuckles of German householders who haven't been saving their, haven't been cutting gas demand as quick as or as rapidly or to levels that they expect.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you're sitting at home and it's cold outside, it has been very cold recently in December so far. Obviously, people turn on the heating.
Even though you're sitting there with your gloves and your scarf on, Andreas, but you're putting in your efforts.
Exactly.
But I think that's a very noble thing you're doing there. But on the other hand, of course, one hopes that the impact of the price cut won't be such as many people are predicting, that it will actually increase demand and will not boost supply in any sense, because supply will go to markets with higher prices. So fingers crossed. But thank you very much, Julia and Andreas, for your summary and your brief look into 2023. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Richard.
We have seen some dramatic events this year in global coal and gas markets, and what's in store for 2023. Helping me to discuss this is Laurence Walker, coal and gas editor at Montel. A warm welcome to you, Laurie.
Thank you, Richard.
So, I mean, in many ways, Laurie, it was a kind of unprecedented. Yeah, I mean, the word is used a lot, but I think here it's quite apt in the sense that who would have imagined, as you say, who would have imagined the year if we'd been sitting here this time last year? I think that's the key element here, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and I suppose what we have to bear in mind is Europe had been very reliant on Russia before this, and so we had. So 67% of our thermal coal from Russia. We had 40% or so of our gas from Russia. As it was a result of the invasion. We had to think of ways to lessen our reliance, lessen our usage of these fuels, whilst also sourcing elsewhere very rapidly, ultimately. And what I would say is quite an interesting thing about this year is kind of how successful it's been. Certainly for the gas, we've reached a stage now where we're having negligible levels of gas coming in, sort of 44 MCM a day or so. This is, we've managed to replace with LNG, we've managed to replace with heightened imports from Norway, from alternative sources. We've also managed to reduce our demand overall, and obviously the European Commission set a target, or a voluntary target, of around 15% reduction in demand for gas, which seems to be achieving. So we've also been using alternative things. So coal has sort of come back onto the scene again, and that's something which, a couple of years ago at least, we were sort of saying completely goodbye to it, and a lot of plants were closing. This year it's come back. I wouldn't say as a saviour, but at least as a kind of an old sort of reliable helper.
But again, it's it's not so good for the climate, maybe, but good for keeping the lights on.
Well, that's certainly the thing, and I think we've had to weigh up very much security of supply versus our climate targets. And I think, on the whole, I don't think Europe has lost sight of those targets. I think what it has done is done what it has to do in the circumstances and sort out this supply security immediately. Punish, you could say, Russia, or at least combat Russia in the only way we can, which is economically. It is through reducing our reliance on them.
Yeah. Would you say we've kind of, how far have we gone in terms of weaning ourselves off Russian gas?
Well, a lot quicker than I'd imagine. So, I mean, I think the ultimate target was 2027. But, I mean, like I say, we're negligible levels now. We're maybe 10% of the 2021 average we're receiving now. So and if you look ahead to next year, it's going to be more LNG capacity coming. There's going to be opportunities to continue that. So while I think, yes, it would be wrong to say we don't need Russian gas now, we are certainly making very good headway in ditching.
And that's interesting, because it's been one of the key parts of, or the most important takeaway really of the crisis, is that we've accelerated the end of the use of Russian gas in a way.
We have, yes, and ultimately, I suppose it can be a benefit, because you're going to see if speeding up renewables capacity, other these sort of things, which or just taking steps to reduce demand, which we may find some of this demand wasn't necessary. Maybe some of the domestic practices will change. There's other other benefits that may come from this as well. And as I said, yes, coal did come back and has been used, and we have seen extensions to plants, but certainly these aren't long-term things. I've spoken this week, I think, a couple of the UK plants who have extended. They're supposed to close in September, but they have continued until March next year for the security of supply. They have no intention of continuing after that, and I think it's going to be similar across the board, where yes, we will see some prolonged usage. Ultimately, the targets are still there to shutter these plants.
So it's be a short, sharp shock for the climate, but we've got the long-term aim, which is the energy transition.
I believe so. Yes, certainly. It's certainly going to put a lot of more reliance on fuels, but perhaps fuels from other origins. So what we're seeing now, for example, with both gas and coal, is we're a lot more open to the, we're a lot more exposed, we say, to the global markets. So, for coal, it's been a thing for a long time. For LNG, for gas, at least, less so. That we're looking at China, we're looking at India, we're looking at the other countries, we're looking at what their demand is going to do, and to what extent we're going to have to fight them for it. So has there been sort of this tug of war we have for LNG supplies, for coal supplies, and so how. As I said, so at the beginning, the trade routes, the kind of the global supply demand has changed very much. But in terms of consumption, how much we're going to be using, I think the trajectory is the same.
But in terms of security of supply, we're keeping the lights on, but it's come at a cost. This is, as you say, to attract these cargoes in, whether they be of LNG or coal, it's not going to come cheaply.
It's not, no. And obviously a lot of what we have now, as I say, it's because we pay up for it. And so, yes, we've had massive LNG arrivals. Yes, but we're paying a lot for this gas. We've had, plenty of coal coming in. Again, we've been paying, huge amounts for it again. This, I suppose, we're in a sort of luxury position in Europe that we can afford to do this. So, for example, with the coal, yes, we've stepped in. Our imports from South Africa this year are going to be up fivefold, more than fivefold of thermal coal. These volumes, a lot of them would normally have gone to India. India can't pay the price. So they will either not have such quantities of coal, sufficient quantities, or they're having to buy lower grade coal, maybe from Indonesia or elsewhere. So yes, we can sort of, I guess, pat ourselves on the back that we have, we're able to pay up, we're able to do this, and it's going to come at a cost. It's going to hurt us financially, but we are in Europe in a position where we can do that. And
there are losers, of course, as you mentioned, India, Pakistan, both on the coal side and the LNG, if they can't afford these fuels.
Sadly, that's the thing, and there are winners and losers, and probably we don't even hear so much about that. But it's certainly, yes, you have to bear in mind if we're taking stuff from another part of the global market, either they are taking Russian coal, which some of them are, or they're taking Russian gas, which some of them are again, often at very, very steep discounts. So it's possibly okay if they're happy to trade with Russia. But yes, obviously, if we expect them to embargo Russian coal as gas as well, then it's a different picture.
Absolutely. And, but this blank check can't last forever. The chickens are going to come home to roost at some stage. We're already seeing, households and industry massively reducing their demand, their use of gas in particular. Prices are extremely elevated. What we're seeing on the market now is maybe easing off maybe the end of next year, but we come to that in a minute, I hope. But it does come at a cost.
It does, yes, and it is. There's no quick fix, and I know obviously there have been discussions. There've been the gas price cap, which is obviously one point. Yeah, we just cap the price of gas. Yes, but then again, for the reasons we discussed about the global market, it makes it difficult in some ways. You don't want to obviously distort the market, and you don't want to also make it harder for us to source or compete on a global market for what is essentially a global commodity, or global commodities. And then, yes, the demand reduction is a big thing. If we're using less, obviously, like anything, the demand is down, the prices are going to go down. There are a few things we can hope for. So we can hope, for example, that in Asia, they're going to have milder weather in the near term, or we can hope that they're going to produce more coal or gas in the near term. So there are a number of variables which can get us there. In terms of being secure in what we do, it is really just, I guess, nailing down the prices where you can. So, and that's something again which is people are quite reluctant to do. It has seemed so. Things like having a long term contract for gas. If we have these environmental targets, a lot of the companies are going to be reluctant to sign a 20-year LNG contract. We have seen. I mean, we saw last month 15-year contracts with Germany for some Qatar gas. They are a possibility, and that's a way of at least knowing how much you're going to pay to some extent, or at least having some control over it and knowing the supply will come in. But yes, apart from that, yeah.
It's not a sustainable strategy in the long term if we're serious about these targets. But if there's one thing maybe, Laura, you could say that took you by surprise that came, so it was of course the invasion was very much unexpected, at least for many experts in Europe. But in the course of 2022, was there one thing that sort of knocked you back?
It's hard to know quite what shocks you in this as well, but certainly the speed at which we've shed our dependence on Russian gas, I think, is quite remarkable. I think probably at the beginning of the conflict, I would have thought possibly maybe by a third, or if we're very good, by a half. But how quickly we, like I say, stuff's become almost irrelevant. So I know early on in the conflict, we were putting stories out regularly about any kind of fluctuation to the flows, and prices were leaping around as a result. And obviously in early March, we had massive hike on the gas price. We got up to 345 megawatt hour for the front month. Again at the end of August, when there were all the issues with Nord Stream 2 about whether it would or wouldn't come back after maintenance. Again, another more spikes. We've got to the stage now where the flows are, I wouldn't say a trickle, but at least they're down to very low levels, and that has almost given us a little bit of peace and time to concentrate on other things, on supplying, getting our supply elsewhere, on worrying about what's going to happen with the US supply, what's going to happen with LNG terminals, because we just don't really anticipate the Russian gas being there anymore. So
absolutely. I mean, again, that if I then ask you about the outlook for the coming months, for the maybe the first quarter in particular, what are you hearing? What are the expectations of Russian flows? Because we heard a few months ago, they'll come to an end at the end of October, or they won't last beyond November. But they've maintained that kind of 40, 45 MCM constantly since September at least.
They have, yes, yeah. I mean, it's been fairly static for a while. Yes, people were expecting it to come to an end, early in the month, last month. I think the expectations, again, people are generally just assuming it will come to a halt at some point. If it doesn't, then that's fortuitous. That's cool. We have that extra bit of gas. If it does stop, I think people are, as they've expected it, it's not going to be a shock. It's not going to send prices into the stratosphere. It's going to be, there will probably be some short-term shock, market reaction, but it's something which is widely expected. So I think now people are more focused on the weather. They're focused on storage. They're focused on how we will get out of this winter and into through this sort of the shoulder period and into the next winter. So I'd say what's very, very important now is the weather. So we've had a relatively mild, with the exception of the past couple of weeks, we've had very relatively mild winter so far, which has again helped us keep our storage levels high. We're still, yes, they've eroded a bit from the sort of 94, 95% or so we had, but they're still, very healthy to get through this winter at least. What people will be looking to next is how much we have at the end of this winter, how much we have going into summer. Then obviously, will we reach that 90% target by November next year as well? I would say in terms of analysis that we've seen, there's general optimism, I think, that we will reach these targets. We can do it. It's dependent on the LNG flows coming. It's dependent on no severe Norwegian outages. Some estimates are based still on a bit of Russian coming in. And obviously, as we mentioned, the reductions in demand as well. And so there's kind of a bevy of things. But I think there's a tentative optimism that we will keep that going. Obviously, part of the reason we had such healthy stocks this year is because we had a lot of Russian gas coming in earlier in the year. So yes, we will have to refill without the Russian gas, but then hopefully if we start from a higher starting point anyway at the end of the winter, if it isn't too severe, then that's okay. But obviously, if we have two months of January and February of just sort of sheer ice hell, then we may be more worrying.
We pray that we don't get a snowmageddon.
No more snowmageddons, no, that'd be nasty. So,
Laurie, so brilliant. I mean, I'd look forward to inviting you back next year, where we can discuss what actually happened over the course of Q1 and Q2. And should be exciting times. And fingers crossed that we don't get this very, very cold snap, and that only lasts for these weeks that we've seen in December. So listeners, you can now follow the podcast on our own Twitter account, aptly named the Montel Weekly Podcast. Please direct message any suggestions, questions, or, let us know if you think you have a good idea for a guest on the show. You can also send us an email to podcast@montelnews.com. Lastly, remember to keep up to date with all that's happening in energy markets on Montel News. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Thank you and goodbye.